If you're a chronic night owl, overnight shift worker, vampire, or I'll sleep when I'm dead aficionado, this overnight tip may add years to your life. And we've got a new, highly controlled, randomized controlled trial to prove it. Unless you actually are a vampire, then you're likely immortal, so this may not apply. However, it may be good to know, just in case. Let's go. Yo, what is up? Welcome back to another week of How to Health. My name is Kevin. I run liftandbalance.com, where we take aim at all things health and longevity and do it in an odd, weird, interesting, and highly sarcastic way. Now, at this point, the data is pretty clear. If you're going to stay up late or stay up well into or through the night on a consistent basis, you're going to be putting your health at risk. And I think that's important for everyone to understand up front, because a lot of people who do it think they can just power through it and be fine, which may be the case in the short term, but when we're talking weeks, months, years, and decades, it's a totally different story. And one of the most telling signs of this not so pretty story is the fact that the International Agency for Research on Cancer has labeled shift work, or consistently working during the hours us humans have been biologically programmed to sleep, as a group 2A carcinogen, meaning something that probably causes cancer in humans. Not cool, I know, but also something that tells you pretty much everything you need to know. That being said, we also need to factor in the reality of life, because many critical jobs keeping society going, high-paying jobs which provide for families all across the world. We're talking doctors, nurses, law enforcement, firefighters, delivery services, transportation workers, factory workers, and many more have a big overnight aspect to them. In fact, about 15% of the workforce in the industrialized world partakes in this type of work on a regular basis. That is a lot of millions of people. Actually, probably right around 1 billion. So, if there were a way to potentially mitigate the risk for these frontline workers and recreational night owls and vampires, it could benefit hundreds of millions of people worldwide. And that is exactly what this new study out of Mass General Brigham sought to explore. But before we get there, it's probably worth explaining why opposing your natural bedtime can be so detrimental to your health. And it all comes down to something known as circadian rhythms. A word you probably know quite well if you've been around this channel, simply because they are so damn important for efficient biological operations. Essentially, these are the natural ebb and flow of biological processes which tend to align with the 24-hour day-night cycle of the Earth, modulating things such as metabolic function, cortisol secretion, gut microbe activity, and a whole lot more, and being regulated by a series of internal biological clocks, the main one being in a small region of the brain outside the hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nuclei, with the others scattered across key organ systems such as the gut, liver, kidneys, and heart. And when these clocks are in sync and aligned, all is good in our biological world, with the best way of keeping this alignment being a consistent, healthy lifestyle, one which serves up circadian aligning cues from the environment each and every day. We're talking morning and afternoon sun, a moderate to high activity level, and consistent daytime eating. And what modern research has found is that our cellular and metabolic function tends to be optimized when we are doing all these aligning things during the day, and the opposite at night, aka sleeping, or that time our body has been shown to be optimized for deep recovery and restoration. Yeah, it's all kind of making sense now. I know. And even though I called out cancer specifically a few minutes ago, there happens to be a lot more potential downside when it comes to risk of disease, as chronic circadian disalignment has been associated with conditions such as cardiovascular disease, obesity, type 2 diabetes, gastrointestinal issues, a weakened immune system, chronic fatigue, cognitive impairment, sleep conditions, more accidents, injuries, and mental health struggles. All likely due to the cellular dysfunction driven directly and indirectly by the disruption of these innate biological rhythms. Getting less overall sleep and at the wrong time, eating when you shouldn't, like in the middle of the night, and likely eating more ultra-processed foods, which exacerbates the dysfunction. I mean, who's having a midnight snack of an avocado or apple? Come on. Being too tired to move your body, and staying inside in an artificially lit environment all day, ultimately creating and feeding a vicious cycle of dysfunction which lays the foundation for disease. Yeah, not cool for biological school. However, like I mentioned before, there may be some strategies that can help. Let's check out that aforementioned study and see what they found. Here, researchers at Mass General Brigham look to build on their prior research displaying how circadian misalignment increased cardiovascular risk factors. But this time, honing in on one of the main circadian modulators to gauge its impact: food. Specifically exploring if meal timing during simulated shift work conditions could influence an individual's risk in one way or the other. And to do this, they set up one of the most controlled circadian alignment studies that I've ever seen, enlisting 20 healthy young non-shift work participants for a 2-week inpatient study at their lab, controlling every aspect of the environment throughout: sleep, food, activity, you name it. Participants had no access to Windows watches, smartphones, tablets to give them any clue of what time it actually was, while also being on a strictly controlled sleep, activity, and meal timing schedule. Sounds fun. I know. Hopefully they got a little bit of money for it, because yikes. To start the study, they were initially introduced to the environment by being kept up for 32 hours straight in dimly lit rooms, maintaining constant body posture and eating identical snacks every hour. And then at this point, they were randomized into one of two groups: a daytime eating group and a nighttime eating group. The key here being that both groups were operating on a night shift schedule, meaning being instructed to be awake and more active overnight to simulate shift work. And throughout the 2-week study, researchers measured several different cardiovascular markers, including autonomic nervous system activity, PAI-1, which is an assay to measure risk of blood clots, heart rate variability to gauge rest and recovery, and blood pressure. So, with that, I bet you're wondering, did the poor kids make it out of there alive? They did. But what did they find? Well, that meal timing probably matters, at least for cardiovascular function when operating on a shift work schedule, as they first observed that a shift work schedule increased cardiovascular risk from baseline across the board, putting both groups of participants in a non-optimal zone from the get-go. However, from there, it was only the group that ate overnight against their innate rhythms, which saw extended worsening of these measurements, a lower heart rate variability, an increase in PIA-1, no moves in blood pressure compared to an improvement in blood pressure for the daytime eating group, yet no significant changes in cortisol levels across the board. Now, it's important to call out that the daytime eating group ended up eating all of their energy within a 12-hour window each day, while the nighttime feeding group had an extended window of about 18 hours, which is quite long. So that could have been a factor here. All that being said, the researchers came to the conclusion that our study demonstrates a meal timing based behavioral intervention can help mitigate the adverse cardiovascular effects induced by a mistimed sleep-wake schedule as typically experienced by night workers. Interesting. And begging the question, should shift workers or any night walker for that matter deploy a daytime time-restricted eating protocol to mitigate the risks of chronic circadian misalignment? Well, maybe. In fact, I think there are a number of things worth tinkering with. Let's talk about them. And the strategy here, at least in my opinion, is all around doing your metabolic best with the situation that you're in. Because as we mentioned way back in the intro, the best approach to avoid the health downside here is to be circadian aligned. Simple as that. So, if you are watching this and you are a self-inflicted night walker, staying up all night for no real reason, except that you like it, stop being silly. However, if your job requires you to work when the average human is asleep, here are some things to consider. First, it's important to realize that doubling down on all of the other healthy lifestyle factors becomes even more critical in this scenario. So, when you eat, really try to make it high quality, prioritizing real whole nourishing foods, prepping them ahead of time if possible so you don't succumb to the tempting ultra-processed options when your willpower is at its lowest, aka when you're tired, and eating them in a 10-hour daily window or less to hedge your metabolic bets, which we'll talk about more in just a minute. Next, there is the exercise component, because one of the most impactful things you can do to keep your cellular machinery operating efficiently, helping prevent and reverse the disalignment and dysfunction, is moving your badonkadonk and doing it in a sweat-inducing way. And the last big one here is overall sleep. Even if it's at odd hours, getting 7 to 8 solid total hours is important. Again, it is the most restorative, regenerating, detoxifying part of our day, so do not skimp out on it. Now, if you're asking practically what this may look like in real life, let's walk through a little scenario. First, when it comes to meal timing, one thing this research has made clear is the benefits to consuming the majority of your energy during the daytime hours, which is consistent with a lot of the other data in this area. So assess your current habits and see how you could potentially accommodate. A strategy here could include consuming your biggest meal of the day right before you start your shift. For example, 7, 8, or 9 p.m. for an overnight shift. Implementing this protocol gradually, in a slow and controlled manner, allowing the body to acclimate for overnight fasting, and setting it up to be sustainable. And when your shift is over, you can head right to bed or have a bite in the morning before you get some shut-eye. And by doing this, you're essentially aligning your eating rhythms with the day-night cycles we've evolved with. Fasting when you would normally be doing so, and sticking to a normal digestion schedule, even though your sleep is a little backwards. Then a way that you may be able to use exercise here is by getting some movement prior to your shift or after you wake up from your post-shift snooze. Not only will this provide a cellular, metabolic, and psychological boost, but it will improve your glucose tolerance by naturally helping you store and metabolize the big pre-workout meal more efficiently, and entrain your circadian rhythms, prepping you for the overnight extravaganza. Another good hack to keep in mind is getting out under that big flaming supernova when you can, especially after you wake up, whatever time that may be. This will send a direct signal to that master clock in your brain that it's daytime, and upregulate daytime gene expression, aka your daytime circadian biology, assisting with maintaining some normalcy in your biological operations. However, all of that being said, the reality is there is no silver bullet when it comes to getting healthy. And there most certainly is no silver bullet when it comes to reversing the dysfunction of living a life against your innate biological rhythms. Staying healthy when performing consistent shift work is no easy task. The odds are straight up stacked against you. So strategy, consistency, and a strong supporting cast of solid, healthy habits are critical. As I mentioned, living this type of lifestyle is something that should be taken very seriously, because no one is going to or has the ability to do the work it takes to keep you healthy while you're doing it. It's all on you. You're the only one that can put yourself in a position to feel good and operate efficiently on a consistent basis. So if you're a shift worker doing a service for society, I first speak for everyone in saying thank you for doing the essential work that keeps society running. And second, remind and urge you to not neglect your most valuable asset in the process. Make the intentional decision to do your best and own it. And if you have any tips or strategies that you found success with on your journey, please, please, please share them in the comments below, because there's nothing like spreading the healthy wealth. And if you happen to be one of those night walkers staying up for fun, come on, man. Help your body help you. Unless you're a vampire, of course. Then you should try some garlic. Great prebiotic fiber for your gut. You'll thank me later.